No one said being an idol group would be easy. There was constant competition, and new groups were springing up everywhere. There were days when you're on top and days when life itself seemed an endless struggle. The road to success was never an easy one. Many groups sweat blood and tears just to make it as the up-and-coming new voice. What fans saw on the outside was much harder on the inside. Seven was a group that had seen their share of battles and wars. They had gone through many trials and tribulations, still refusing to give up on their dreams. Even though they had already made it, it was staying on the top that was now the hope of every member. They wanted to be the best of the best and be remembered as Tokyo's idol of the millennium. What they wanted was in hand reach, and nothing was going to change that. No one was going to deprive them of their winning streak. Rose Petals Chapter 4. Hiroaki stood in the kitchen with an apron around his waist. He loved cooking and thought about having his own gourmet show. It would probably bring in a lot of views, him being an idol and all. He had received calls from local shows asking him to be a guest. They involved some form of cooking, but with a date. The show was called Erotica Gourmet. He was teased by the others what the strawberries and whipped cream would be used for. He quickly called back and declined. Everyone was excited when he made time to pull together a gourmet meal. They were tired of the hotel menu, which after a week would repeat itself. Ordering out was okay, especially when they were too tired to walk to the ground floor's all-you-can-eat and drink bar. His cooking surpassed all. The others had tried to bribe him on occasion, but he was never in the mood to do so. Even Yakuto said that for a week he would stay out of the library. What could be the special occasion for this delicious breakfast? Was it someone's birthday, a visitor, or some other good news? Hiroaki smiled and said that he was moved to make the meal. They ate with content at his explanation, allowing their taste buds to caress every bite and savor every gulp. Akira had taken 3 extra servings. He was a growing boy and needed more food for fuel than the others. They laid out around the table, unable to move with satisfaction. 2 hours later, they received a phone call from Miss Adachi. She wanted them to be judges for an audition she was holding later that afternoon. The boys had worked before with her and her models. They also did an opening act for her agency's 5th anniversary. Miss Adachi's daughter was a huge fan of Seven and had a huge crush on Ren, which she sometimes encouraged. Hideo and Yakuto teased Ren about his misfortune, for the girl was not attractive at all. When they arrived at the agency, they went to the back door. Miss Adachi didn't want them seen by the contestants or any passers-by, in fear that a stampede would follow suit. Hideo excused himself to the restroom to try and get a peek at the girls. He wanted to see which one of them was worth him passing by so that they could gaze upon his beauty. He was yanked back by the neck by Ren, who knew him all too well and was sent by the others to look for him. For their help, Miss Adachi invited them to a soiree afterwards. There would be plenty to drink and plenty of girls. She knew their taste and had called her very best models to attend. She can benefit off of them. Keeping them happy means many doors opening, for her business, and hopefully for her daughter. The first contestant sang an 80s song that matched well with her raspy voice. The beat was up-tempo and had everyone tapping their feet. She was very charming and self-assured. Yakuto, Ren and Akira were enthused by her. Hiroaki felt she was more like a solo artist and wouldn't fit well in a girls' group. Hideo hated the sight of her, saying she was too rough around the edges. He was probably jealous since she sang mainly to Ren and would sometimes glance at Yakuto with a smile. They agreed that Miss Adachi should still make an investment in her. The second contestant was the complete opposite from the first. She was soft-spoken and extremely shy. The boys had to lean forward in their seats to hear her give her name and personal information. Like the others, Yukuto couldn't make out any words she spoke or sung. He wondered how she even passed the pre-screening and was able to get this far for a second audition. He thought maybe she knew somebody, who knew someone else, and so on. The third seemed more like a bully. She yelled her name to the judges and demanded that a chair be brought to her to allow her to sit during her audition. She gave Hideo a horrific look that sent chills down his entire body. He turned in his seat every time their eyes met and cried with horror. He was almost perspiring, which was on the rarest occasions. She winked at him a few times to let him know that she wanted his full attention. She was definitely not someone he wanted to look at. She had a bad girl image, which to Akira and Hideo looked more like a drug dealer with a gangbanger infusion. If that is hard to imagine, think of someone incognito with a bandana wrapped around one leg. They were both surprised that she didn't just walk in and held up the audition. After she was finished, Miss Adachi felt that they needed a 5-minute break. In actuality, she wanted to find the culprit who called this girl in for an audition and fire them. She wouldn't have any sort of distasteful staff. No. Not anyone with bad taste. The auditions resumed once more. No one had called the third contestant. She saw some of the girls waiting and had bombarded her way in. Her cold eyes made one of them give up her third position for 13. A number not set to being called. She had basically walked in uninvited, like a bank robber. Miss Adachi nor her secretary kept up with how many invitations were sent out, and was more clueless about this contestant than the previous. At least she knew who gave that girl a call back. The door slowly opened as contestant 4 walked into the center of the room. Miss Adachi smiled and leaned over to the judges. She whispered. She sang a little for me at her pre-audition. She's very pretty and her look is exotic. Stunning voice too. She sat back in her seat. Hideo and Ren had taken notice of the contestant also. To Hideo, her beauty was something he had seen in a Bollywood film. Particularly Padmavat, which he watched over and over. She had an uncanny resemblance to the heroine in his favorite movies. Divine beauty like hers, and not to mention like his. He was intrigued with her look and was ready to see what else this angel had to offer. Ren sat in his seat, restless. Before he was composed, but now he could hardly keep still. He felt his throat go dry and searched vigorously around for his water bottle, without taking his eyes off of her. This was the stranger whom he had brushed past on the plane because she was taking up the aisle, slowly removing her carry-on bag. She was also there at the restaurant ordering his table a glass of red wine. This was the girl who stared at him rudely during the fan invasion, or any time their eyes would meet. She obviously had no manners and was young, naive and immature, yet alluring. This time she looked different. Her look didn't aggravate him and he was almost taken back by her loveliness. Before, it was hard for him to take notice of her beauty, since her hair was unkempt from her travels. She wore no makeup and her look was grungy. He only felt that there was something about her that drew his curiosity. A feeling he was unsure of and didn't understand. He leaned forward to get a closer look. Could this be the same girl? Her face was lowered and her eyes were closed. She looked up slowly, opening them. He leaned forward more in anticipation as her lips slightly opened. Her light green eyes would gaze to meet his. His eyes widened as they stared at each other. She did not move or make a sound. What seemed to Ren like ages had finally gone by. She apologized, bowed and ran out of the room. Miss Adachi looked around confused. What happened? Maya quickly ran past the other contestants and out into the dark street. Her feet kept moving as tears suddenly streamed from her face. She didn't want to stop as she ran past a couple and a few kids, bumping into one of them. Hey, watch where you're going. She ignored them and kept on. She began to slow down as she felt a pain in her chest. Gasping for air, she knelt down and sobbed uncontrollably. What just happened? Her mind was racing, all her thoughts seemed jumbled. How could I have blown this? She reached into her pocket and pulled out her cell phone. Her hands trembled as she touched Shiho's contact. It rang a few times before it went to voicemail. She tried again and finally got an answer. Hey, how did it go? Please come get me. What's wrong? Are you crying? Yeah, but I'm okay now. Are you still at the audition? No, I'm near a park that's across the street from a hotel. Is it near a convenience store? Or a snack place or something? Yes, that's the one. She sniffed. Okay, I can't remember the name, but I'm familiar with that area. Just text me the name of the hotel and the nearest street. Shiho paused for a moment. Give me about 30 minutes. I have a friend over. Just wait for me at the park. The music was loud and disturbing to Ren's concentration. He wasn't in the mood for any party, and after a few weeks felt like he was still dealing with jet lag. He had to admit, the models that Miss Adachi brought were top-notch. There was one in particular that caught his attention. If he wasn't thinking so hard about contestant 4, he could probably relax and get in the mood like everyone else. The model, who was also watching him, got up and walked towards him. Even though she was slim, she was stacked in all the right places. She wore a red and gold kimono with a dragon on the left side that was shorter than even the mini dresses of the 70s. Her hair was flowing and smelled as if it was just washed. She smelled like the most expensive perfume. Either she was rich or she had a lot of sugar daddies. She smiled at him and began kissing his neck. She, like the rest of the models, had delusions of grandeur. She was relying on her looks alone, like most, to become the next girl to date any one of them. No girl was ever seen with them outside of the usual professional norm. Everyone knew that they were bachelors. What they didn't know was if there were any significant others ever in their lives. Getting the dirt on 7 proved to be quite hard. Rin kissed her neck and slid his hands around her waist, holding her tightly. She tried to kiss his lips, but he quickly looked away. Rule number 1, don't do that. She agreed and settled for his kisses everywhere else. He kissed her shoulder as he moved his hands up to her rib cage. His lips laying closer to her neck. He could feel the lump in her throat as she gulped. She tossed her neck back, allowing her hair to hang loosely. It seemed as if the music was fading as he continued to engage her. She was in her own fantasy world. He wasn't sure what world she was dreaming about, but he was quickly awakening to a reality. He somehow felt that he was annoyed being there. The scent of her overly sprayed perfume made his nose burn. He sniffled and tried to control his sneeze. I'm not in the mood. He pushed her away. He needed some fresh air. The atmosphere somehow seemed smothering. I need some air. I'm a step outside for a bit. She wanted to follow him. He stared at her, his silver eyes menacing. She backed up and decided to join the rest of the party. He pulled the balcony door, allowing the cool breeze to hit his face. He looked down at the empty street. He could see the park from a distance, where couples were walking holding hands. He thought about her and wondered if she had made it home already. He thought until his head was starting to hurt. What is it about this girl? She never spoke her name. He only remembered the number 2 that was placed hastily on her shirt. She was the 4th contestant. He was trying hard to remember if she had gotten that far. He watched again as the couple's silhouette became distant. Hideo popped a Blu-ray disc into his PlayStation. He turned the TV on and sat on his bed. He watched Padmavat with enthusiasm. The girl he had seen at the audition was captivating him. She was what he had admired on the Bollywood screens. His joy soon faded when he realized that he knew nothing about her. She had ran out of the audition, and all he could remember was her placement number. She was number 4. Or was it number 2? He had to find her somehow. Where to start? Miss Adachi had kept the information of every contestant that had auditioned for her from the past and those who had officially become part of her agency. She always graded them from the first audition to their debut. If she saw no improvement, she wasted no time in having them hurled out of the building. It was unusual for him to call the woman since he cared little for her. She mainly spoke to either Hiraki or Ren. Even Ikomuri found her not to his liking at all. He was one of the founders of the group but refused to have any dealings with her. Before he left, he had advised them to stay as far away as possible from that leech. After a few rings, she picked up her phone. Her tired, high-pitched voice spoke softly through the phone. "Who's this?" "It's Hideo." "Oh, hi. How are you?" A call from 7 was like the second coming of Christ, let alone the most beautiful of them all, Hideo. She sat up and pressed her ears to her cell to listen attentively. "What can I do for you?" "I'm inquiring about contestant number 4. The girl that was 4th to audition." "Oh, really?" She was careful not to mention her name since Hideo wasn't the first to call asking about her. An elderly gentleman from another agency that was also judging the contest had made the same inquiries along with Ren. Even though Maya had run out of her audition, her beauty had captivated him. Even if she didn't have any talent, he was willing to take her under his wings and train her in any aspects of his agency. A singer, model, or actress, you name it. This had brought to Miss Adachi's attention that she was sitting on a gold mine. When Ren had called asking that she be given another chance, that had sealed the deal. Now Hideo, whose godlike opinion mattered the most, had made her realize the potential of this girl. The problem that she was having was too many wanting her. Since Ren's family was also in the entertainment business, he probably wanted to sign her. It would be best to keep her name a secret until she can seal it with a contract. "I think she should be given another tryout." "Well, you're not the first to bring that suggestion to mind. I've had a few other callers, you know." "Who was the other person?" "Someone you know quite well." She paused for a moment and smiled to herself at the silence. Drama would have been her first name if she didn't have one already. She loved to see people at odds with each other. Why shouldn't she have a little fun? "I'll schedule another audition. Would you be attending again as a judge?" "If I'm needed, I will fit it in with my busy schedule. Just tell me when. It would be an honor for you to once again grace us with your presence." Miss Adachi actually wanted to size up both Ren and Hideo. There was more to this girl than she thought, and she would have to keep an eye on her. Neither of them had heard or seen Maya's performance, yet they both seemed interested in her. That was something she would not tolerate. Ren or any of the members of 7 was for her daughter or herself if she was able to fulfill that desire, and no outsider was welcome. Hideo assured her that he would be there before hanging up. Even if he had to fake some form of illness, he must see her again. Who were the other callers, was the question that was roaming through his mind. Could it possibly be one of his fellow men? He was sure that the least person would be Ren. She was definitely not his type, and lately there was so much on his mind that he had basically closed himself off from the world. Maybe it was Yakuto. She had a grungy style to her that he would most likely go for. Akira didn't look old enough, him being a late bloomer. He was more interested in his fellow high schoolers. A few college women did grab his attention, but he found them to be too possessive. Besides, he wouldn't stand a chance. she would look at him as a kid brother. As for Hiriako, he would rather look at cuisines. If she would have grabbed his attention, it would have been through a meal. It could also be another scouter, who had seen what he also saw. That wouldn't be good news, since most agencies were either allies or enemies. They were all on the same wavelength, looking for the next best thing. And believe me, she was. It shouldn't matter anyway. Once she set eyes on him, the rest of them would be history. He laid back down on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. Imagining having his own exotic princess come to Tokyo, where he thought he would have to travel to some distant land to find her. He smiled to himself. He had to make sure that he would stand out and that after the audition he'd be able to speak to her. He need not worry who the other guy would be. And if it was a rival agency, he would entice her to join his or push come to shove Miss Adachi's. There was no other comparison to him. He thought about the amount of women, unsure of the figure, he and his group had accumulated. They all had different tastes in women, as well as women having differences in which one of them they preferred. Some of course went for the bad boys type, which was Ren, Yakuto, and Ikimori. Others like the intellectual type, Hiroaki. The cute and innocent type was a plus, Akira. And last, but not least, the narcissistic, princely type, him. But then again, all the women didn't care which one they got, as long as they were able to spend that one special moment with one of them. This girl wouldn't be like those desperate, stalking females. She was foreign and exotic. If she wanted to, she could command any man in her presence, including him. He was willing to be her possession. The only other woman that came close to having her way with him was his ex. And her beauty was nothing to this golden empress. He thought again to himself how different she would be, and how it would be to have someone as beautiful as her on his arms.